This is the case of 27-year-old Erika Alonso and how she vanished after going out on Valentine's Day. Erika Melissa Alonso was born on March 26, 1987, and she lived in Laguna Hills, California. She had a very big family. She had 4 sisters and a brother, and all her family says that she was a social butterfly. She could make conversation with a complete stranger, and she just had such a vibrant and great personality. She dreamed of one day finding love, getting married, and having children. But unfortunately, someone would take all of that away from her. It was February 14th, 2015, Valentine's Day. Erika had made plans to have lunch with her on and off again boyfriend Larry. Now Larry was 45 years old and Erika was 27, so their relationship was not good. Erika's family says that the two of them had a very rocky relationship and that they had been trying to make it work for the past 2 years. In fact, one of Erika's sisters says that the first time that she met Larry, she didn't like him. She felt like he was very arrogant and she just knew that something was off about him. However, despite her family's feelings, Erika wanted to make the relationship work, and that's why she agreed to meet with him on Valentine's Day. It was supposed to be just a quick lunch, but as the day progressed, Erika had still not come home. One of her sisters checked her Snapchat story and saw that she was out at a club with Larry. Family just figured that Erika was going to be with Larry for the night and that they would see her in the morning. However, when Sunday, February 15th rolled around, Erika was still not home. The family wasn't too concerned, they just figured that she was most likely still with Larry. It wasn't until the following day, on Monday, February 16th, that the family really got concerned. This is when they got a call from Victoria's Secret letting them know that Erika had never shown up for her shift. This just wasn't like her. She would never miss work without letting anyone know. That's when the family decided to call the Orange County Sheriff's Department and report Erika as missing. And they told the police that the last person she was seen with was with Larry. Police go speak to Larry at his home in Irvine, California, and he tells them that after lunch, him and Erika decided to go out to a club. They took an Uber to the Sutter Lounge, which was about 15 to 20 minutes away from Larry's home. And a couple of people actually saw Erika at this nightclub, and they say that she was acting completely normal and was having a great time. Larry says that Erika befriended a couple at the club and that the 4 of them got to talking and decided to continue partying after the club closed. So at around 1:30 in the morning, Erika, Larry, and this couple headed over to his apartment and continued the party. Everything was going well until about 3 o'clock in the morning. This is when Larry says that him and Erika got into an argument. He doesn't remember what the argument was about, but it did make the couple feel uncomfortable enough for them to leave. The couple left at about 3:45 in the morning, and Larry says that 15 minutes later at 4 a.m., Erika also decided to leave. She got inside her white 2014 Honda Civic and then drove away. And then that was it. That was the last time that Larry had seen Erika. Police eventually identify this mystery couple, and they tell the police the same story as Larry. And since according to police, the couple and Larry were so cooperative, police cleared them from any involvement in Erika's disappearance. An entire month would go by without any movement in the case until March 25th. That was when police had found Erika's car. Police found her car near Glenwood Park covered in dust and parking tickets. Okay, go to part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 27-year-old Erika Alonso and how she vanished after going out on Valentine's Day. Police found her vehicle near Glenwood Park, which was about 2 miles away from Erika's home. When they looked inside her vehicle, they found her purse and they also found a stuffed animal. When Erika's family heard about the discovery, they were completely shocked because they say she wouldn't leave her purse behind. Also, why was it parked in this random neighborhood? Police towed the car and they sent it to a forensic lab for further testing. And in the meantime, the family remained hopeful that Erika was still out there and that she was still alive. And 2 months after her disappearance, they had finally found Erika. But unfortunately, it wasn't the way the family had hoped. On April 27, 2015, a group of biologists were working in the Cleveland National Forest near the Ortega Highway. And while they were working, they came across a decomposing body. They immediately called the police, and when police went to retrieve the body, they immediately knew that this was Erika Alonso. When Erika's dad heard that a body had been found near the Ortega Highway, he immediately drove over there and waited to see if this was his daughter. Police wouldn't give him any details. All they told him was that they had found the body of an unidentified female. Erika's dad just sat in his car, hoping and praying that this wasn't his daughter. But unfortunately, it was. Police were finally able to confirm that this was Erika Alonso. She was found in a fetal position, wrapped in plastic, saran wrap, and duct tape. Based on this, police believe that Erika was a victim of a homicide. An autopsy was conducted, but because the body was so decomposed, the ME was not able to determine a cause of death. So he decided to order a handful of toxicology tests in hopes that this would lead to answers. And when the results came back, they determined that Erika had lethal amounts of alcohol and GHB in her system. Her blood alcohol content was 0.22, which is 3 times the legal limit in California. Along with that, they had also found GHB in her system, which is a known party or date rape drug. The combination of both substances is what the ME believes led to her death. Because of this information, police no longer believe that Erika was the victim of a homicide. Instead, they believe that she had overdosed. Now, when Erika's family heard these results, they were completely shocked. Erika didn't do those type of drugs, and they don't understand how this got into her system. Now, let's just say that Erika did take that drug all on her own. How was she able to drive all the way from Larry's house back to her house on that drug and with that amount of alcohol in her system? There's just no way she would have made it without crashing. Also, did she really go all the way to the Ortega Highway, wrap herself in plastic, saran wrap, and duct tape, and then toss herself into this forest? No, obviously someone did this. Erika's family says that if she did overdose and someone saw this, they should have called the police and asked for help, not wrapped her body in plastic and just dumped her in the forest. Even though homicide has been ruled out by the police, it doesn't mean it's been ruled out by the family. They truly believe that Erika was murdered. The family also doesn't believe that Larry is innocent and that he knows more than he's telling them. He was literally the last person to have seen Erika, and he claims that she just drove away. But there's really no way to prove that. All the family wants is the truth and justice. If you know anything about what happened to Erika, please contact the number on the screen. This is the case of 4 teenage girls that were brutally murdered inside a frozen yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. On Friday, December 6, 1991, 17-year-olds Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were working the night shift at an I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop. The yogurt shop was very busy that night. There were a lot of customers, and at one point, Eliza's own mother even stopped by just to check in on her daughter, and everything seemed to be going well that night. Around 9:30 p.m. that night, Jennifer's younger sister Sarah stopped by the yogurt shop with her best friend Amy. The two girls were planning on having a sleepover later that night, so they went to the yogurt shop to wait for Jennifer to get off work so she could bring them back to Sarah's house. That night, the store was set to close at 11 p.m., and the rule was that 15 minutes before closing time, the girls needed to lock the front door. That way, any new customers wouldn't be able to get inside while the girls cleaned up and counted the money. So at 10:25 p.m. that night, Eliza and Jennifer began cleaning up the shop with the help of Sarah and her best friend Amy. At around 10:42 p.m., the final few customers were getting ready to leave the store when they noticed that the only people left inside were Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah, plus 2 men. These 2 men were just sitting at a booth. They weren't even eating frozen yogurt. They were just having a can of soda, and they were whispering to each other and just acting kind of odd. One of the customers leaving was a woman, and she saw this and she thought it was a little bit strange, so before she left, she asked Eliza and Jennifer if they were okay. The girls said no, that they felt fine and that they were just cleaning up and then getting ready to leave soon. Eliza and Jennifer said goodbye to the woman. They locked the front door with the 2 men still inside the store and then went back to cleaning. 15 minutes later, it was 11 p.m., closing time, which meant that the store should have been completely clear of any customers, and the only people left inside should have been Eliza, Sarah, Jennifer, and Amy. However, 3 minutes after closing time at 11:03 p.m., there was a no sale rung up in the cash register. So next to the frozen yogurt shop was a party supply store, and at 11:47 p.m. that night, the owner of the party store realized that there was smoke coming from the yogurt shop and he could see flames inside. Firefighters immediately arrived to the scene, and as they were going through the building, they came across the nude bodies of 4 teenage girls: Eliza Thomas, Amy Ayers, and sisters Jennifer and Sarah Harbison. All 4 girls were found stripped, bound with their own clothing, and shot in the head. Police originally believed that this might have been a robbery gone wrong, but then they realized that there was still money inside the cash register. So if this was just a robbery, why did they leave the money behind? There were also no signs of a break-in. The front door was still locked, but the back door was unlocked and had been propped open with either a rock or a pack of cigarettes. Since the building had been lit on fire, any potential evidence was pretty much destroyed. Really wasn't much to go off of, but 8 days after the murders, police had made an arrest. Okay, more details are in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 4 teenage girls that were brutally murdered inside a frozen yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. 8 days after the murders, teenager Maurice Pierce was seen walking around the mall with a .22 caliber gun, same type of gun used to kill the girls. So police arrested him, and when they questioned him, he implicated 3 other boys: Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Wellburn. All 4 men were brought down to the station for questioning, and of course they denied having anything to do with the murders. However, Maurice said that he lent his gun to Forrest Wellburn, who then used that gun to commit the murders. Of course, when Forrest was asked about this, he denied having any involvement, and when police conducted a test to see if Maurice's gun would match the ballistics found at the crime scene, the test came back as not a match. So, due to lack of evidence, all 4 men were released. Now police were back to square one, and the case was pretty much stalled stalled until October of 1999, 8 years after the murders. This is when the Austin Police Department arrested 4 men in connection to the crime. And police were already familiar with these 4 men. They were the same young men that they had arrested and released 8 years earlier. Now, at first people were thinking that police had found some new evidence tying the 4 men to the murders, and that's why they were finally arrested. But no, police hadn't found any new evidence, and the only thing that they had was 2 newly obtained confessions. One from Michael Scott and the other from Robert Springsteen. Robert and Michael were interrogated for over 4 days, and they eventually confessed to killing the girls. They did implicate Forrest and Maurice, but when Maurice and Forrest were questioned, they never once confessed. So, since Maurice and Forrest never confessed to the murders and there really was no evidence tying them to the crime, the charges against the 2 of them were dropped. So, the only 2 people left to go through with the charges were Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. Then, 10 years after the murders in 2001, the trials began. Both of their attorneys tried to argue that their confessions were 100% coerced. You can actually watch part of their interrogations on YouTube, but their defense attorney tried to argue that police berated the 2 men, and that's why they eventually broke down and confessed. At one point during the interrogation, a detective grabs a weapon and puts it against Michael's head and tells him to confess. They tried to recant their confessions, but in the end, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen were both found guilty of murder. However, 5 years after the trial, a judge overturned both of their convictions on the grounds that their constitutional rights were violated during the trial. Before they could be released from prison, police wanted to try one more time to see if they could tie these guys to the murder. During the autopsies, police had found a partial male DNA on one of the girls. And now, with the advancement of technology, police did a test to see if the DNA would match any of the 4 men, and it didn't. So, because of that, Michael and Robert were released. It's now been over 30 years since these 4 beautiful girls were murdered, and their killer remains on the loose. Police have yet to find the 2 men that were sitting at the booth, but a lot of people believe that they may be the ones responsible for the crime. This is the case about an 18-year-old girl working at McDonald's who was strip searched by her manager and her manager's fiancé. On April 9, 2004, 18-year-old Louise Ogborn pulled into the McDonald's parking lot in Mount Washington, Kentucky to begin her shift. She was only planning to work in the morning, but as the day progressed, the restaurant got busier and busier. That's when 51-year-old assistant manager Donna Summers asked Louise if she would stay for the dinner rush. Louise was always willing to take on extra shifts, so she agreed. As the dinner rush continues, Donna receives a phone call from a man who identifies himself as Officer Scott. Officer Scott tells Donna that one of her employees is being accused by a customer of stealing $50 from her wallet. The customer couldn't remember the employee's name, but they did describe her as a petite blonde woman that was working at the cash register. As soon as Donna heard that description, she immediately knew that it was Louise Ogborn. Officer Scott tells Donna that there's 2 options. He can either go down to McDonald's and arrest Louise, or if she wants to avoid getting arrested, she can conduct a strip search on Louise inside her office. Donna feels like that's the better option, so she agrees. Calls Louise into her office, and as soon as Louise hears the allegations, she completely denies them. While the search is conducted, Officer Scott remains on the phone, and he's basically guiding Donna on what to do. Just to make sure that she isn't hiding the $50 inside her clothes, Officer Scott tells Donna to make Louise strip down. Donna brings in another employee named Kim to overlook the strip search, and Kim thinks that this is weird, so she asks Donna if this is okay. Donna asks Officer Scott, is this allowed? And he says that he has the McDonald's manager and a McDonald's corporate representative on the other line, and that they've approved of this strip search. So since corporate approved it, Donna and Kim continued. They made Louise take off all of her clothes, and she was just left in her bra and underwear. Then Officer Scott tells Louise to also remove those items. After this, Louise is left completely naked. Kim gives Louise a black little apron to use as a cover-up, and Officer Scott tells Donna and Kim to gather up all of Louise's belongings, put them inside a bag, and then go leave them outside in Louise's car. An officer would stop by later to grab the clothes and take them in as evidence. So now Louise is left inside this office without her phone, without her bag, without her car keys, and without her clothes. About an hour into the search, Donna needs to get back out there and run the restaurant, so she brings in another employee named Jason Bradley to watch over Louise. Jason picks up the phone and Officer Scott tells him to remove Louise's apron and describe her body to him. He realizes that this is wrong, like no real officer would make you do this, so he hands the phone back to Donna and tells him he won't do this. This is when Donna called her 42-year-old fiance Walter Nix to come down to the restaurant and watch over Louise. And the abuse and torment just gets worse with Walter. Officer Scott tells Walter that he needs to make Louise remove her apron and perform a handful of exercises to see if the money would fall out of her body. He made Louise run in place, do jumping jacks, get up on the chair, turn around, bend over, all while being naked. If she didn't obey Walter's orders, Walter would punish her by spanking her. He spanked her for over 20 minutes, and he spanked her so hard that there were red marks left on her butt. Then Officer Scott tells Walter to make Louise give him a BJ. And Walter complies. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of an 18-year-old girl working at McDonald's who was strip searched by her manager and her manager's fiance. So, Officer Scott tells Walter to make Louise give him a BJ. How doing any of this relates to finding $50 doesn't make any sense. At this point, Louise has been inside this tiny, cramped office for over 3 hours. She has no car keys, no phone, no clothes, nothing. She says she felt trapped, she felt numb, and she was scared of what Walter might do to her if she didn't listen. So, because Louise feared for her life, she complied. After giving Walter the BJ, Walter buckles up his pants and leaves the McDonald's. He doesn't even tell Donna why he's leaving. He just hands her the phone, walks away, gets inside his car, and calls his friend and says, "I did something bad." Walter knew that what he had just made Louise do was wrong. Why he complied? I don't know. After Walter leaves, Donna calls in an off-duty custodian named Thomas and asks him to watch over Louise. Thomas starts speaking over the phone to Officer Scott, and Officer Scott tells him to remove Louise's apron and describe her body to him. As soon as Thomas heard this, he knew that this was wrong, and he hung up the phone and told Donna that this was fake. This was not a real police officer, and he called the real cops and waited for them to arrive. When police looked back at the surveillance footage, they couldn't believe that this was real. How did these people fall for something so stupid? Just because someone tells you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. Yet Donna, Walter, and Kim went along with all of these commands from an Officer Scott. What's crazy is that this wasn't the first time that this had happened. These hoax calls had happened 73 times in over 31 states. Someone would call into the restaurant pretending to be a police officer investigating a crime, and he would make the managers at these restaurants perform these horrendous things. He would make these managers assault these young female employees, and the managers said that they went along with it because they genuinely thought that they were helping the police. It's crazy that this happened over 73 times, and no one had caught the caller yet. Police work hard to track down the caller, and they end up finding 38-year-old David Stewart. David Stewart was a husband, father of 5 correctionals officer that lived in Panama City, Florida. And when police were investigating the calls, they discovered that they came from prepaid calling cards purchased from a Walmart in Panama City. And when they went to go look at the surveillance footage at these Walmarts, David Stewart appeared. On June 30th, 2004, David was charged with solicitation of sodomy and with impersonating a police officer, which are both felonies. His trial began in October of 2006, and he pled not guilty. His lawyer claims that there's no evidence to prove that David made these phone calls. Just because he bought the calling cards doesn't mean that he made the call. After weeks of a trial and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with the verdict. They found David Stewart not guilty. One thing to note is that since David was arrested, there have allegedly not been any more hoax calls. As for Donna, she was indicted on a charge of unlawful imprisonment and she served a year probation. As for her ex-fiancé Walter, he was also charged and served 5 years in prison. Louise sued McDonald's and won $6 million. My heart goes out to Louise and to all of the victims in these hoax calls. Let's see how well you know Law & Order SVU. If you can answer all of these questions correctly, then you're a true SVU fan. Let's go. The first Law & Order SVU episode premiered when? How many episodes did Ice-T originally sign up for before becoming a main character? Name one of Olivia Benson's boyfriends throughout the show. What's her name? Why did Detective Stabler attack this man? Are Elliot and Olivia endgame? Let me know how many answers you got correct, and make sure to go check out Law & Order SVU on Sling TV. If you enjoy watching mystery and true crime, then Sling is the place for you. You can watch shows such as Law & Order SVU, Chicago PD, NCIS, and so much more. There are no contracts, so make sure to go check them out by clicking the link in my bio and let me know which show you're most excited to watch. This is the case of 22-year-old Drew Shadeen and how she was abducted from a mall parking lot. Drew Shadeen was born on September 26, 1981 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Drew was studying visual art at the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, and everyone describes her as a very fun, confident, and outgoing person. On Saturday, November 22, 2003, 22-year-old Drew Shadeen finished her shift at Victoria's Secret at the Columbia Mall in Grand Forks. Drew finished her shift at around 4 p.m. but decided to hang around the mall for a bit, and she went to the Marshall Field store to buy herself a handbag. Then, about an hour later at 5 p.m., she walked out to her car, which was parked outside of a JCPenney. As she was walking out to the car, she was talking on the phone with her boyfriend, Chris. They were having a normal conversation when all of a sudden, Chris heard Drew say, "Oh my God, okay." And then the phone call ended. Now, Chris really didn't think much about this. He just figured that the call had dropped and that he would hear from Drew later that day. 2 hours later, at around 7:42 p.m., Chris received another phone call from Drew, but he didn't hear anything. He couldn't hear any people speaking in the background. All he heard was static noise, so he just figured that Drew had called him by accident. Now, while Chris was trying to figure out what had happened, Drew's college roommate Meg was also starting to get worried because it had been hours since she had heard from Drew. So Meg called the campus police department and asked them if they could go to the mall to see if Drew was still there. The police officer heads over to the the mall and he notices that the only car in the JCPenney parking lot was Drew's. He starts inspecting the car, but he doesn't see any broken windows or any type of damage. However, he did notice that the car was unlocked and there near the driver's door was a knife sheath. They also found her wallet inside the car, which meant that Drew wasn't the victim of a robbery, but instead she was the victim of an abduction. Detectives start going through the CCTV footage inside the mall to see if they can find Drew and see if anybody was following her. They spot Drew at the Marshall Field store, but she's completely alone. It doesn't seem like anyone was following her or watching her closely. They start looking through the footage of other stores inside the mall to see if they can find someone that stands out. They start looking through the footage from a Target inside the mall, and that's when they spot this man. 80 minutes before Drew was abducted, a man was inside Target just people watching. He was walking up and down the aisles without a basket, without a cart, and without buying anything. He wasn't even looking at the items, he was just looking at the people around him. He ended up sitting down by a bench near the exit, and as soon as a blonde girl exited the store alone, this man followed after her. Now this girl isn't Drew Shadeen, but she is a blonde young girl. What are the odds that 80 minutes before Drew's abduction, a man was seen inside Target following a blonde girl? Police were able to capture a photo of this man's face, and they started going through their sex offenders database to see if they would find a match, and they did. This man was 50-year-old Alfonso Rodriguez, a level 3 sex offender who was released just 6 months before Drew's disappearance. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 22-year-old Drew Shadeen and how she was abducted from a mall parking lot. So Alfonso Rodriguez was a level 3 sex offender who was released from prison just 6 months before Drew's disappearance. When you're a level 3 offender, that means that doctors and police believe that you will most likely reoffend and that you are a risk to the public. So when he was having his hearings to be released, his own family literally asked officials not to release him. His own mother literally said, "Do not release my son." That's how dangerous people thought he was, but yet he was still released. So police spoke to Alfonso and he said that yes, he was at the mall the day Drew was abducted, but that he was there just watching a movie. However, when police went to go check his alibi, they discovered that that movie wasn't even playing in theaters. They also checked his car and the smell of cleaning supplies was just overwhelming. Inside the car, they also found this container that was filled with cleaning liquid. Inside the container was a knife, the exact type that matched the knife sheath found outside of Drew's car. Now, along with all of that, investigators also found blood that matched 22-year-old Drew Shadeen. So, 10 days after Drew's disappearance, police arrested 50-year-old Alfonso Rodriguez. Now, even though police had made an arrest, they still needed to find Drew and bring that closure to her family. They searched, and 6 months after Alfonso's arrest, Drew's body was found. On April 17, 2004, Drew's body was found in a ditch in Crookston, Minnesota. She was found unclothed from the waist down with her hands bound behind her back. Her throat had been cut and there was a rope and a plastic shopping bag wrapped around her neck. She had unfortunately been essayed and possibly suffocated to death. Drew was this young, beautiful 22-year-old girl who was just going to college and trying to accomplish her dreams, and this horrible man had to take everything away from her. So after finding Drew's body, Alfonso was charged with the kidnapping and now murder of Drew Shadeen. Since he had taken her across state lines, the prosecution was allowed to seek the death penalty. And this actually was the first federal death penalty case in North Dakota. The trial went on for some time, and in September of 2006, Alfonso Rodriguez was found guilty and sentenced to death. He spent a handful of years on death row up until September of 2021, so just last year. This is when a judge overturned the death sentence for Alfonso and stated that Alfonso was entitled to a new sentencing hearing because evidence showed that the medical examiner was guessing on the stand and that his defense attorneys did not adequately explore mental health evidence. However, prosecutors have said that if a new trial or a new sentencing does occur, they will once again seek out the death penalty. So we'll see what happens with that, but for now, Alfonso continues to remain behind bars. As for Drew's family, they did sue the state of Minnesota because they felt like Alfonso should have remained locked up. If his own family was literally begging them not to release him back into the world, they should have listened. The state ended up settling and they agreed to pay the family $300,000, but they never admitted to any mistakes. This is a case of 4 University of Idaho students and how they were murdered in the middle of the night. 5 students lived in this house on King Road in Moscow, Idaho. On the first floor, we have roommate BF. On the second floor, we have roommate DM and 20-year-old Xana Kernodle. Lastly, on the third floor, we have 21-year-olds Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves. On the night of Saturday, November 12, 2022, Maddie and Kaylee arrived to a bar called the Corner Club at around 10 p.m. They were there for a couple of hours, and then at around 1:40 in the morning, the 2 girls headed over to a local food truck to get some food. After this, they made their way back home and arrived at around 1:56 in the morning. Later that night, Kaylee posted this photo on Instagram with the roommates plus Xana's boyfriend Ethan Chapin, and she captioned it, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." Now, as for Ethan and Xana's routine that night, they had gone to a house party nearby and had gotten back to the house at around 1:46 in the morning. Now, even though Ethan didn't live at the house, he decided to spend the night there with his girlfriend. So by 2 o'clock in the morning, all of the roommates plus Ethan were already at the house, either asleep or getting ready for bed. However, we do know that Xana remained awake for some time because at around 4 o'clock in the morning, she ordered a DoorDash order to be delivered to the house. Around that same time, roommate DM was woken up by the sound of what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog Murphy up on the 3rd floor. A short time later, she heard who she thought was Kaylee say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." However, this also could have been Xana because her phone records show that she was on TikTok at around 4:12 in the morning. So after hearing someone say, "There's someone here," roommate DM looked outside her bedroom door, but she didn't see anything. Then, DM opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's bedroom. She also heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Finally, DM opened her door a third time when she heard crying, and this time she saw something. She saw someone dressed in all black wearing a mask that covered their nose and their mouth walking towards her. He was a male, 5'10" or taller, not really muscular but athletically built, and had bushy eyebrows. This man just walked past DM as she stood frozen in place and headed over towards the back sliding glass door. After seeing this male, she quickly locked herself back inside her room. Later that morning at around 11:58 in the morning, either roommate BF or roommate DM called 911 and requested help for an unconscious person. And when police arrived to the scene, they found the deceased bodies of Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. All 4 of them had been stabbed, and police believe that the murders happened somewhere between 4 o'clock in the morning and 4:25 in the morning. During the investigation, police did find a shoe print outside of DM's bedroom, and they also recovered a tan leather knife sheath that was lying on the bed next to Maddie's right side. Through surveillance footage, police also discovered that a white sedan had passed by the house numerous times the night of the murders. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of the University of Idaho students that were murdered in the middle of the night. Police saw that a white sedan had passed by the house at least 3 times starting at 3:29 in the morning. Then at around 4:04 in the morning, the vehicle was seen entering the area for a 4th time. Then 16 minutes later at around 4:20 in the morning, this car is seen speeding away from the area. After reviewing the footage, police put out the word that they were looking for the owner of a 2011-2013 Hyundai Elantra. That's when a Washington State University police officer began looking into his system to see if anybody at WSU had registered a white Elantra. And someone did. The white 2015 Hyundai Elantra was registered to 28-year-old Brian Koberger. He gave this information over to the Moscow Police Department, and as soon as they saw his bushy eyebrows, they knew that this was him. So let's talk about Brian. Brian was actually a PhD student studying criminology at Washington State University. He had undergraduate degrees in psychology, and he had actually applied for an internship at the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. As police started digging further into Brian, they discovered that he had put a survey on Reddit where he was asking people from prison to describe their thoughts, emotions, and actions from the beginning to the end of committing a crime. For example, one of the questions he asked was, "Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? Please detail what you were thinking or feeling." So police started looking into his phone records, and they discovered that the night of the murder, his phone had connected to a cell tower in Moscow, Idaho at around 4:48 in the morning. So they followed the route of his phone, and it led them back to Pullman, Washington, which is where Brian lived. However, his phone pinged again later that morning near the home at around 9 a.m. And this is before police had even arrived to the crime scene. On top of that, they also discovered that Brian's phone was near the house at least 12 times before the murders. All those times, except for one, were either early in the morning or late at night. If Brian did commit this, I just think it's so eerie that he went back to the house after committing these murders. On December 27, 2022, police recovered trash from Brian's family residence in Pennsylvania, and they sent the DNA found in the trash over to a forensic lab to see if it would match the DNA found on the knife sheath that was found near Maddie's body. When the results came back, they determined that the DNA found on the trash belonged to the father of the DNA that was found on the knife sheath. This meant that at least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. Now, this trash was taken from Brian's family home, so this DNA could possibly belong to his own father. So after finding all of this information, on Friday, December 30th, 2022, 28-year-old Brian Koberger was arrested and charged in the murders of Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Maddie Mogan. We'll see what happens with the trials, but it just breaks my heart that these these 4 young kids lost their lives way too soon. They were just college kids trying to have fun, live their best life, and they had so much to live for. My thoughts and prayers go out to the families, and I hope that Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana get the justice that they deserve. This is the case of 25-year-old Tiana Notice and how she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend on Valentine's Day. Tiana Notice was born on February 4th, 1984 in Massachusetts. Growing up, her family says that she was very artistic and she was really into singing and writing her own songs and writing poetry. Tiana graduated from high school while also doing her first year of college at Fitchburg State College. She received her degree in political science and then she went back to school to get her master's degree in communication. While getting her master's, Tiana was living in Plainville, Connecticut, and she had also gotten a part-time job working at a university. So she had a lot on her plate and she wasn't really looking for a relationship. However, that all changed in 2008 when she met a man on MySpace. This man was named James Carter. Through his profile on MySpace, it seemed like James had his life all together. He put on there that he was an executive at an insurance company, that he owned his own home, that he had a really nice car. The two of them continued talking through MySpace and then they decided to finally meet in person. They met in a public place and everything went well. From there, they continued seeing each other in person until the relationship turned official. However, 6 months into it, Tiana learned a disturbing fact about James. He was actually being charged for DV against an ex-girlfriend and was being sentenced to 5 months in prison. He had never told Tiana about this DV charge. He never told her about the sentencing hearing. He never told her that any of this was part of his life. It turns out that this wasn't the first crime that James had committed. He had a pretty lengthy rap sheet with crimes ranging from DV to assault. And Tiana had no idea about any of this. She had no idea that the guy that she had been dating for the past 5 months was a criminal. James served his time in prison and when he was released, him and Tiana tried to rekindle the relationship. However, Tiana just couldn't get over the DV charges and her father Alvin also thought that James had been cheating on her. So after about a year of dating, Tiana ended the relationship with James. However, he did not take this well at all. He began stalking and harassing Tiana. He would show up to her apartment, he would park in the parking lot and just watch her. He would show up to her work, he would show up to school, he would follow her to the grocery store, everywhere. Since he just wouldn't stop, Tiana went to the Plainville Police Department and she filed a restraining order against James. Thankfully, they did grant her this RO, and after James found out that there was a restraining order against him, he was angry. He would send her these threatening emails that would say, "Trust me, you are going to lose everything. As God is my witness, punishment is on the way, so be prepared." Over the course of 6 weeks, Tiana had gone to the police department over 33 times to report James for violating the restraining order. But all of those times, police never did anything. At one point, James had gone to Tiana's apartment and had slashed her tires. When she went to the police department to report this, they told her that there was no proof James had done this, so they didn't do anything about it. That's when Tiana's father, Alvin, decided to install a security camera outside of Tiana's apartment. That way, if he ever went back, there would be proof of it. Okay, more details in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 25-year-old Tiana Notice and how she was murdered by an ex-boyfriend on Valentine's Day. A few days later, it was February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. Tiana was at work at the university when she received a handful of calls from James. Tiana's co-worker had actually seen this, so now Tiana felt more comfortable going to the police station and reporting James because now she had a witness. Now, Tiana lived in Plainville, Connecticut, but since she was working in Waterbury, Connecticut, she had to go to the Waterbury police to report this. And when she got to the Waterbury Police Department, they told her that this restraining order was fake. They literally accused her of having a fake restraining order and they told her that they weren't going to listen to her complaint because this wasn't real. They could have easily called the Plainville Police Department to confirm that this was a real RO, but they didn't. Tiana literally left the police station in tears and she had to call the Plainville Police Department and ask them to fax over a copy of the RO just to prove that it was real. So while Tiana waited for this to be faxed over, she went back to her apartment and when she got inside, she found a note. Someone had slid this note underneath her door. This note said, "Tiana, forgive me. I never cheated on you. If I'm lying, may God take my life. Forgive me for everything else I have done." And this letter didn't even need a signature because Tiana already knew that this was James. The following day, it was February 14th, Valentine's Day. That day, Tiana received even more threatening emails from James. In one of the emails, he wrote, "Please don't tell the cops about this. Please get rid of the restraining order so I can get a job. I'm extremely nervous. You know I'm taking a risk by talking to you." Tiana had enough, so she went to the police department and she reported these emails and the note that James had left her the day before. This time, police listened. They told Tiana that they were finally going to arrest James for violating his restraining order. So Tiana left the police station that day feeling happy. She was thinking to herself, it's finally over. However, that was a lie. Police never arrested James. In fact, they simply called him, they told him that Tiana had gone to the police station and reported him for harassing her, and told him that if he did this again, he would be arrested. And if you remember, in the email he had sent her, he told her, please don't go to the cops. So now, in his eyes, Tiana disobeyed him. Since police told her that James was going to be arrested, Tiana felt safe enough to go back to her apartment to quickly pack a bag. She arrived at her apartment at around 9:30 p.m. She parked her car, walked over to the front door, and there, someone attacked her. Tiana was stabbed over 20 times, twice in the chest. She managed to call 911, and on the call she said, "Help, my ex-boyfriend stabbed me to death." Tiana was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she didn't make it. The attack didn't capture in view of the camera, but it did capture the audio, and it captured Tiana running away. And since Tiana had identified her killer in the 911 call, police arrested James Carter. He was charged with murder, and he is now serving 60 years in prison. Tiana's family did sue the police department for negligence, and they were awarded $10 million. They started a foundation, and their goal is to fix the system that failed their daughter. Tiana asked the police for help so many times, but they failed her. This is a case of 26-year-old Prisma Reyes and how she vanished after having lunch with an ex-boyfriend. On Wednesday, April 17, 2019, Prisma went to go work at her new job at a car dealership. She pulled into work and she was able to find a really good parking spot. However, one of her coworkers actually confronted Prisma and accused her of stealing her preferred spot. They got into a little bit of an argument and Prisma reported this to her superiors and then just continued on with her day. At around noon, Prisma left the car dealership and went to go on her lunch break. Went to go eat at a Tex-Mex restaurant and she actually went to go eat with her ex-boyfriend Ryan. They enjoyed some food and drinks together, and after a while, Ryan left the restaurant. However, some witnesses say that Ryan and Prisma got into an argument during this lunch, and that's why Ryan left. However, we don't know if that's actually what went down. After her ex-boyfriend Ryan left, Prisma stayed at the restaurant for another 3 hours. She was by herself, and throughout these 3 hours, she called her son's babysitter, and they spoke on the phone for an hour. When asked about this conversation, the babysitter says that they simply spoke about her job, and they also spoke about what time Prisma was gonna go to pick up her son. After this, Prisma continued to remain at the bar for another 2 hours until the bartender eventually had to cut her off. They got into some type of verbal argument, but the specifics of this argument have never been released by police. After this verbal argument, Prisma was asked to leave the restaurant. After leaving the restaurant, Prisma got inside her white Jeep Wrangler and she headed in the direction of the dealership. On her way back to the car dealership, Prisma got into another altercation, but this time it was a road rage incident where she pulled on another driver. This driver called the police, but by the time they got there, Prisma was gone. After this incident, Prisma continued to make her way to her job, but then she actually did a U-turn and instead of going to work, she began making her way to her ex-boyfriend's apartment. Security footage shows Prisma parking her car outside of the apartment building, and she kind of parked her car at an angle where it was kind of blocking an intersection. Seems like she was just gonna park quickly, get down, and then get back in her car and leave. After parking her car, Prisma quickly gets out and runs through the security gate to quickly get in before it closes. Once Prisma makes it inside, she heads over to the parking garage elevators, and that's when we see her pacing back and forth, speaking on the phone. She called multiple friends and family members during this time, expressing to them that she was upset about something. After speaking on the phone for several minutes, Prisma gets inside the elevator, and that's when she runs into another resident of the building. Now, this resident told police that Prisma got into the elevator and that she was crying and that she appeared very distraught. It just didn't seem like she was okay, and this resident says that they don't remember what floor Prisma got off on. That is the last surveillance footage of Prisma Reyes. She never showed up at the babysitter's house to pick up her son, and that's when the babysitter reported her missing. Police say there's no footage of Prisma ever getting inside the apartment building or leaving. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the disappearance of 26-year-old Prisma Reyes. They say that there is no footage of Prisma actually getting inside the apartment building or leaving. Some of the exits throughout the building didn't have any cameras, so police can't prove if she actually left. On top of that, police also found Prisma's car still parked in the same spot, so if she did leave, it wasn't with her car. Now, since Prisma had gone to lunch with her ex-boyfriend earlier that day and then was last seen trying to get into his apartment building, police wanted to go speak to the ex. Police went to go speak to Ryan, and he says that the last time he saw Prisma was at lunch. He told police that he actually had a date that night, so as soon as lunch ended, he got inside his car and he went out of town for this date. He says he didn't return to his apartment until around midnight. But of course, police still searched his apartment and they also searched his car and they didn't find anything. They also checked his alibi, and his phone records did show that he was out of town at the time that Prisma was at his apartment. Police went to go speak to the employees at the restaurant where Prisma and Ryan had lunch. The employees at the restaurant say that Ryan didn't introduce himself as Ryan, he actually introduced himself as Matt. He was also wearing a hat and sunglasses during this time. Now, police thought this was weird, like why would you use a fake name while at a restaurant, and why were you wearing a hat and sunglasses inside? So police went to go question him about this, and Ryan says that yes, he was wearing a hat and sunglasses, but he denies ever calling himself Matt. After confirming his alibi and checking his apartment and his car for evidence and not finding any, police have cleared Ryan from the investigation. However, a few days after Prisma's disappearance, he did pack up all his things and he moved out of the apartment, which some people find a little bit odd. Prisma Reyes was last seen in 2019, and to this day in 2023, she is still missing. Her family does believe that foul play was involved because she would never willingly abandon her son. She absolutely adored her son, and she was calling the babysitter earlier that day about what time she was going to go pick him up. But she didn't plan to abandon him. The family tries to hold on to hope that their daughter is still alive, but they believe that she might have been sex trafficked or kidnapped. You know, a lot of people do wonder about the ex-boyfriend. Just because his phone records show that he was out of town during that time doesn't mean that he was actually out of town. Some people do wonder if they did get into an altercation at the restaurant and then Prisma decided to go to his apartment later that night to kind of talk things over. And when she got to his apartment, something bad happened. On the other hand, some people find the babysitter suspicious. The family themselves say that they didn't find out about Prisma's disappearance through the babysitter. They actually found out through the police. And they find this odd. If the babysitter was the one that made the 911 call and reported Prisma as missing, why wouldn't she call the family to let them know, hey, your daughter is missing, or have you seen your daughter? If you know anything about what happened to Prisma, please contact the number on the screen. This is the case of 16-year-old Susana Morales and how a police officer has been accused of murdering her. On Tuesday, July 22nd, 2022, 16-year-old Susana Morales went to go visit a friend that lived nearby. This friend lived in the Sterling Glen Apartments, which was near Susana's home on Santa Ana Drive. Susana would normally walk to this friend's house, so this was a route that she had taken many times. She left her home at around 6 p.m. and was at her friend's house for a couple of hours. At around 9:40 p.m., Susana texted her mother Maria and told her that she was on her way home. Again, this should have taken her a very short amount of time since they lived so close. It should have taken her about 10 minutes. However, when 10 minutes went by, Susana was still not home. Maria began texting and calling Susana to see if everything was okay, but she never got a response back. The family continued to try and get in contact with Susana, but at about 9 a.m. the following morning on July 27th, the Morales family called the police department and reported Susana as missing. However, the police department told the family that they didn't believe Susana was missing or that she was in any type of danger. In fact, they told the family that she was most likely a runaway. They also told them that they needed to wait 48 hours before officially reporting her as missing. Now, the family knew that Susana would not voluntarily leave. Things were great at home. She had a loving family, she had loving sisters, loving parents, a boyfriend, and it just wasn't like her to go completely MIA. So the family took the investigation into their own hands and they started going around the community asking if anyone had seen Susana the night that she disappeared. And someone did. One of their neighbors caught security camera of Susana walking home. Now, this neighbor's house was very close to the Morales house. It was literally just a 1-minute walk. You can see Susana wearing a yellow tank top, light blue jeans, and white Crocs. She was walking by herself on the route that she would normally take to go back home. However, somewhere between her neighbor's house, which was just a minute away, and her house, something happened. Family showed this footage to the police because it clearly shows that Susana was not running away. She had her phone on her hand and she was literally walking home. So police looked at this footage and they decided to look at her phone records to see if it could ping a location. Phone records showed that between 10:07 and 10:21 p.m., Susana was walking in the direction of her house on Singleton Road. Then, between 10:21 p.m. and 10:26 p.m., her phone indicated that she was in the area of Oak Lock Trace and Steve Reynolds Boulevard. After that, her phone either died or was turned off. After discovering this information, there really wasn't any serious movement in Susana's case. It literally took police a month to put out a statement letting people know that Susana was missing, but at this time, they still considered her a runaway. However, that would all change on February 6, 2023. This is when the remains of 16-year-old Susana Morales were discovered along Highway 316 between Drowning Creek and Barrow County. And next to Susana's remains, police found When police checked the serial number, it came back as belonging to 22-year-old Miles Bryant. And it turns out that Miles was actually a police officer. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 16-year-old Susana Morales and how a police officer has been accused of murdering her. Near Susana's body, police found that belonged to 22-year-old Miles Bryant, who was currently a police officer for the Doraville Police Department. When detectives discovered that a police officer was found near the crime scene, they were very confused. I mean, this can't really be a coincidence. They start looking deeper into Miles, and that's when they discovered that on July 27th, Miles actually reported as missing. He claims he accidentally left his truck unlocked and that someone broke into the truck, they stole his weapon, they stole his military ID, and they also stole his wallet. Now, Miles filed this police report at around 11 a.m. on July 27th, just 2 hours after Susana's family had reported her as missing. Now, what are the odds that this guy's weapon was stolen 2 hours after Susana was reported missing? And then that same weapon was found near Susana's body. Just didn't make sense, so detectives looked further into him, and that's when they discovered that Miles Bryant actually lived at the the Sterling Glen Apartments, the same apartments that Susana was at the night that she disappeared. Not only did he live there, but he also worked as a courtesy security officer for the building. Now, all of this is no longer a coincidence, so on February 13th, 2023, 22-year-old Miles Bryant was arrested and charged for the murder and kidnapping of 16-year-old Susana Morales. He was also accused of filing a false police report since he claims that his weapon was stolen, but in reality, it wasn't. When Susana's family heard that a police officer was arrested for her murder, they just couldn't believe it. They said that a police officer being involved was the last thing that they ever suspected. They never thought to themselves, oh, maybe a cop did it. Like, this was just so surprising. Family says that they had no idea who Miles Bryant was and that they don't believe that Susana knew him. Police have also come out and said that they haven't been able to find any type of connection between Susana or Miles Bryant. This possibly is a stranger-on-stranger crime. So this is what police think happened. The night of July 26, 2022, Susana Morales did leave the Sterling Glen Apartments at around 9:40 p.m. Then, somewhere between 10 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., detectives believe that Susana encountered Bryant and that he possibly offered her a ride home. He did have his patrol car with him. He would always take it home with him. So police don't know if he did use his car or his power as a police officer to lure Susana into his car. Maybe he saw Susana walking home by herself and he decided to approach her and said, oh, I'm a cop, I can give you a ride home. It's possible that he did use his power as a police officer to get Susana to get inside his vehicle and to trust him. Detectives believe that somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 o'clock in the morning on July 27th, Susana was killed. The cause of death has not been revealed yet, but at this time, detectives don't believe that she was... Yes, the weapon was found near her body, but they don't believe that's what killed her. As police dug further into Bryant, they discovered that he had a history of stalking and harassing women. For now, Bryant remains behind bars, and I just truly hope that Susana Morales gets the justice that she deserves. Let's talk about the disappearance of 49-year-old Graciela Garcia. Graciela lived in Hermiston, Oregon, and that's where she met her husband and started her family. She had 4 children in total, 2 daughters, Annabelle and Gabby, from a previous relationship, and then she had 2 sons, Arturo and Jacob, with her current husband. However, after about 17 years of marriage, Graciela and her husband decided to divorce. After the divorce, Graciela met another man named Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez. They had been dating for about 6 years, and at the time of Graciela's disappearance, she had been married to him for about 3 years. Now, Graciela's kids say that they did not like this man. He was very possessive and controlling over their mother. He would follow her around to see what she was doing, who she was talking to. He would try to go through her phone. Graciela owned a hair salon business that she would run out of her home, and anytime she would have a client over, Romero would just be there watching Graciela work. On November 8th, 2019, Graciela was supposed to bring dinner to her 14-year-old son Jacob, who was staying at his father's house. However, instead of Graciela showing up to deliver the dinner, Romero showed up instead. Now, Jacob thought this was a little bit weird because he was expecting his mother and she was always the one that would bring him food. He asked Romero, "Where is my mom?" And Romero said, "Oh, she's back at the house. She fell asleep, so I'm bringing you the food instead." He handed Jacob his food, walked back inside his car, and then left. This was a little bit weird, but Jacob really had no reason to think that Romero was lying to him. The night continued, and at around 7 p.m., Jacob realized that he had 2 missed calls and a text message from his mom. He immediately sent a text message to his mom and started calling her, but all of the calls went straight to voicemail. That's when he alerted the older siblings and told them, "Hey, mom never showed up to give me my food, and she's not answering any of her phone calls." The next day, Romero went to Annabelle's house, the oldest daughter, and told her, "Your mom is gone." He was crying and he was saying, "I don't know where she is. I woke up on November 9th and she wasn't in bed. I don't know what happened to her." That's when Annabelle and the rest of the siblings immediately went to their mother's house and began looking for her. When they walked inside the house, they noticed that everything looked a little bit too organized. Anytime Graciela would go out, she would kind of make a mess. She would leave her makeup everywhere and her clothes everywhere, but this time everything was clean. They continued looking around the house, and that's when Gabby noticed that there was a heavy blanket inside of the washing machine. This blanket was soaked in water, and Gabby knew that this wasn't her mom's doing. Her mom used to tell her to never wash blankets or jackets or anything that big because she was worried it would break the machine. So the fact that this big, heavy blanket was inside the washing machine just seemed odd. Her car was still parked outside, her purse, her clothes, everything was still inside the house. The only items that were missing were her ID, her passport, and her phone. After not being able to get in contact with their mother, the family decided to call the police on November 11th, 2019 and report Graciela as missing. Police immediately arrived to the scene, and from the start, they believed that Graciela's disappearance was suspicious. They checked her phone records, and it showed that her phone last pinged at 12:30 a.m. on November 9th in Washington. After that, her phone was either turned off or disconnected. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the disappearance of 49-year-old Graciela Garcia. They also checked locations that Graciela would frequently go to see if they could find any clues there, but there were none. There really wasn't much to go off of. The last person that saw Graciela was her husband Romero, and honestly, he wasn't being too helpful. In fact, he actually got upset at Graciela's family for calling the police. He confronted the family and said, "Why did you call the police? Why didn't you tell me you were doing that?" Graciela's family was like, "Well, what did you think was going to happen? Of course we were going to report our mother as missing." However, he was upset about this, and Gabby says that from that moment, he started to distance himself from the family. The family began hosting vigils and rallies and protests to bring awareness to Graciela's disappearance. Now, police did look into the husband Romero, but they say that he was very cooperative and very helpful in the investigation. He gave up some of his DNA, he took 3 polygraph tests, and he even consented to a search of the house. So as of now, they have never named Romero as a person of interest or as a suspect. However, Graciela's family feels like he honestly had something to do with her disappearance. A couple of clients from Graciela's hair salon came forward and said that a few days before her disappearance, she was acting a little bit odd. She seemed flustered, she seemed frustrated, and she was venting to them saying that she didn't know what to do about her husband. She didn't want to be with him anymore, and she just felt very suffocated. About 3 to 4 months before her disappearance, she was talking to her daughter Gabby and told her, "Listen, here's my 401k paper, like I just want you to know where all of this paperwork is, just in case something happens to me." Gabby said this conversation freaked her out, like she didn't want to think about something happening to her mom. She didn't understand why her mom was telling her this. However, Graciela told her that she just wanted the kids to get the money in case something happened to her, and that she didn't want her husband Romero to have access to any of her money or any of her property. Because of these instances, the family honestly believes that Romero did something to Graciela. They feel like the police aren't doing enough to search for Graciela and find out the truth. Gabby has created a TikTok account to spread awareness on her mother's disappearance, so I will link that down below so you guys can check it out and show her some support. Gabby says that the police never looked into the blanket that was found in Graciela's home. She told them that this blanket was suspicious and that it seemed odd, but they never took it in for evidence, and she often wonders, why was that blanket in the washing machine? At the end of the day, all the family wants are answers and closure. The family knows that Graciela would never willingly leave. She absolutely loved her family, she loved her children, she loved her business, she loved life. She would never just up and leave without letting her family know what was happening. Family does have a GoFundMe open to raise funds to hire a private detective. If you have any information about the disappearance of Graciela Garcia, please contact the number on the screen. Here is all of her information, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and I truly hope that you all get answers soon. Let's talk about the disappearance of 16-year-old Haley Sadler and how she disappeared on a class trip. Haley was from Pennsylvania, and in 2015, she went on a class trip to New York. There were a couple of chaperones on this trip, and lights out was supposed to be at 10 p.m. However, that night, Haley and her best friend decided to sneak out of the hotel room and go to a nightclub. The age range for this nightclub was 16 years old and above, so that's how Haley and her friend were able to get in. The theme for that night was circus night, so pretty much everyone was dressed up. Throughout the night, Haley was seen dancing with a man wearing a clown mask. Now, he was much older than Haley, but they weren't kissing or doing anything like that. They were simply just dancing. However, throughout the night, Haley and her best friend got separated. Her best friend called her numerous times, she sent her text messages, she looked everywhere in the club for her, but she couldn't find her. That's when the friend decided to go to the school chaperones and tell them that Haley was missing. One of the school chaperones, Professor James, calls Haley's parents and also calls the police, and the search begins. Of course, police number one suspect was the clown guy. They start looking for this guy, and it ends up being a man named Vincent Drago. They go to interview Vincent, but he denies having anything to do with Haley's disappearance. However, when they inspected his car, they did find drops of Haley's blood, and they also found her necklace. He says he has no idea how those things got inside his car, but either way, he was arrested. As the trial was getting closer, the chaperone of the night, Professor James, was supposed to testify to talk about what he saw the night of Haley's disappearance. However, when it was time for him to testify, he never showed up. Police thought that this was weird, so they started looking into him, and that's when they discovered that he was having an inappropriate relationship with his student, Haley. And when police go to his house to confront him, they walk in on him and Haley in bed. Yes, this full-grown adult was having a relationship with his 16-year-old student, and the two of them had planned her disappearance. Haley said that she purposely left the blood inside of Vincent's car, and she left her necklace on purpose to frame him. That way, with time, people would think that she had passed away, and then she could go live happily ever after with her teacher, James. I know, crazy. But thankfully, this is a fictional episode from the show Law & Order SVU on Sling TV. If you enjoy watching mystery and true crime, then Sling TV is a place for you. There are so many shows and channels to choose from. You can watch Disappeared, American Monster, See No Evil, 48 Hours, and so many other true crime shows. If you're looking for more of a mystery, you can watch Chicago PD, Law & Order SVU, and so much more. Make sure to go check out Sling TV by clicking the link in my bio and let me know which show you're most excited to watch. This is the case of 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson and how she died during a trip to Cabo with her friends. Shanquella was born on January 9th, 1997 in Charlotte, North Carolina. She studied business, and with her degree, she was able to open 2 businesses. One was called Exquisite Boutique, which was a woman's fashion line, and then she also opened Exquisite Kids. Exquisite Kids' mission was to help kids fall in love with their natural hair, so she would actually go and she would braid the kids' hair herself. She just seemed like an overall hardworking person that genuinely wanted to help benefit the world. At university, Shanquella met a man named Khalil Cook, and he quickly became one of her closest friends. They were so close that he would actually go on vacations with Shanquella and with her family. He ended up introducing Shanquella to one of his own friend groups that consisted of 5 people. This was a group of friends, and they all decided that they wanted to take a trip to Cabo. Now, Shanquella didn't really know these people that well. Again, these were Khalil's friends, but Khalil was pretty much her best friend, so she felt comfortable enough going on the trip and, getting to know everyone else a little bit better. So on October 28th, 2022, Shanquella and 5 of the 6 members flew from North Carolina to Cabo. 6th member Nazir Wiggins was actually going to fly in the next day. The group was staying in this very nice, luxurious villa. It was so spacious, they had enough room for at least 12 people, and they even hired a private chef. So it was supposed to be a fun and just very relaxing trip. As soon as Shanquella landed, she called her mother Salamandra and let her know that she had arrived safely. Everything sounded okay, so Salamandra told her daughter, "Okay, be careful, talk to me tomorrow, I love you." But unfortunately, that would be the last time that Salamandra would ever speak to her daughter. On their first night, everyone was drinking, partying, having a good time. There was actually a video filmed by Khalil of Shanquella passed out in a hammock. He approached Shanquella and he said, "We got our first dead body." Now, that might have been a joke in the moment, but looking back at what actually happened to Shanquella during this trip, it's very eerie. Next morning, on October 29th, the entire group was getting ready to go swimming. Shanquella actually posted an Instagram story where she was going around the house looking for her friends. She was going from room to room saying, "It doesn't take that long to get naked, where y'all at?" She eventually comes across a room, and when she goes inside, she finds all of the friends there. Now, when Shanquella walked inside the room, it got completely silent. When you walk into a room and you can just tell that people were just talking about you, that's exactly how that video feels like. Everyone was fully clothed. It didn't look like they were all getting ready to go swimming like they had planned. Only a few hours after that Instagram story was posted, a doctor was called to the villa at around 2:13 p.m. for someone who needed medical attention. And this person was Shanquella Robinson. Dr. Gutierrez arrived to the scene and says that Shanquella appeared to be dehydrated, disoriented, verbally unresponsive, and appearing to be intoxicated. She told the rest of the group that they needed to take Shanquella to the hospital, but they refused to. They claimed that it was too expensive. Around 4 p.m., Khalil called Shanquella's mother and told her that Shanquella wasn't feeling well, but not to worry about it because a doctor was at the villa and everything was going to be okay. However, an hour later, Shanquella had a seizure and was struggling to breathe. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson and how she died during a trip to Cabo with her friends. Soon as Shanquella went into cardiac arrest, Dr. Gutierrez immediately called the paramedics. They arrived to the scene and they started doing CPR. They did 14 rounds of mechanical CPR and they gave her 5 doses of adrenaline. But unfortunately, none of that worked and Shanquella was declared dead. After this, Khalil calls Salamandra and tells her, "Your daughter is dead." As soon as Salamandra heard that, she said her heart immediately dropped. She was thinking to herself, "What does he mean she's dead? My daughter was alive just a few hours ago." After this, the remaining group, which is also known as the Cabo Six, returned back to North Carolina. It could make sense that they didn't want to continue partying after their friend just died. However, their search history shows that they were looking for flights back home 24 hours into the trip, before Shanquella died. So why were they already looking to leave early? When they got back to North Carolina, they went to Shanquella's house and they gave her family her suitcase. After this, each of them would go to Salamandra's house and they would offer their condolences and just talk about Shanquella's death. They all told Salamandra that Shanquella had died from alcohol poisoning. However, Salamandra did not believe this. She says that her daughter would never get that crazy, even while on vacation with her friends. As each friend came to visit Salamandra, she would ask them, what happened that day, and everyone kind of had like a different story. For example, one person would say, "Oh, Khalil was the one that called the police that day." Then another friend would say the complete opposite and would say, "Oh, no, actually it was this person that called the police." Salamandra just thought it was weird that they couldn't get their story straight. Then, Salamandra received an anonymous call from someone letting her know that Shanquella's death wasn't an accident and that she was actually assaulted on the trip. The video started going viral on the internet that was taken on October 29th, the day that Shanquella died. In the video, Shanquella is naked and being beaten by one of the girls on the trip. She doesn't fight back in any way, and at one point you can even hear who people believe is Khalil telling her, "Can you even fight back?" Shanquella responds and says no, and the assault continues. Now, some people speculate that the reason Shanquella was naked in that video is because that was the morning that they were all supposed to go swimming. Maybe they were gonna go skinny dipping, I'm not sure, but after Shanquella filmed that Instagram story where she was going around the house looking for her friends, it's believed that Shanquella went back to her room, and then that's when she was essentially jumped by her friends. Because the video went viral, the FBI and even the Mexican authorities got involved. For that, there wasn't even a murder investigation going on because at this point, people still believed that her death was because of alcohol poisoning. But after seeing that video, things changed. Shanquella's parents were able to get an English copy of the full death certificate and the autopsy, and it did not match what the friends were claiming. This report listed Shanquella's death as a severe spinal cord injury, and there was no mention of alcohol or intoxication, meaning that wasn't even relevant to Shanquella's death like her friends claim. She also had a bloodshot and swollen eye, a bump on her head, and her lip was cut open and swollen. As of now, no one has been arrested for the death of 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson. The family attorney has revealed that they are going to meet with White House officials to discuss the death of Shanquella and the situation regarding the arrest and extradition of the individual accused. It's not fair that this happened to her and that these people are just out and about acting as if nothing happened. All we can do right now is continue to spread awareness, and I truly hope that Shanquella receives justice. This is a case of 20-year-old Ana Fernanda Basaldua Ruiz and how she was found dead inside a base of Fort Hood, Texas. Ana was born on October 18, 2002 in Michoacan, Mexico. She lived there with her mother Alejandra and with her sister Natalie, and her father actually lived in Long Beach, California. In 2020, Ana decided that she wanted to move to the United States, so she decided to enroll in the Army. She had a dream of having a successful career in the military, and she wanted to serve her country proudly. Because of the pandemic, her enrollment was delayed, so she wasn't able to actually enroll until 2021. Once the enrollment went through, they sent her to live at a base in Fort Hood, Texas. Now, if you're wondering why Fort Hood sounds so familiar, it's because that's the same base that 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen lived at when she was murdered. If you recall from Vanessa's case, she had told her friends and family that she was being sexually harassed by someone at the base. Well, it turns out that Ana did the same thing. She told her friends and family that she was being sexually harassed by one of her sergeants. At first, Ana was scared to come forward because she didn't want to get in trouble or get kicked out. Then she realized that the harassment needed to stop, so she told her superiors, but nothing was done about it. They told her that they would move the sergeant to another area, but they never did that. Instead, they actually transferred Ana to a different platoon and just kind of hoped that the complaints would stop. But they didn't. Ana told her friends and family that she was still being harassed and she didn't know what else to do. At one point, someone at the base had tried to choke Ana. She told this person to stop, and this guy kind of just laughed at her and made it seem like it was a joke. On March 8, 2023, Ana called her mother Alejandra and told her that tough things were happening to her. She said things were not going well at the base and that she wanted to move back to Mexico and be with her family. On Saturday, March 11th, Ana texted her father Baldo and told him that things were not going well and that she wanted to die. Baldo immediately texted his daughter back but received no response. None of his messages were going through, so he decided to check Ana's location, and it showed that it last pinged at a park inside the base. The next day, on Sunday, March 12th, he tried to contact his daughter but once again received no response. Then, on Monday, March 13th, 2023, military representatives arrived to Baldo's job and told him, "Your daughter is dead." After this, they called Alejandra, who was back in Mexico, and they told her over the phone, "I'm sorry, but your daughter is dead." They told her that they found Ana with a noose around her neck and that they believed that Ana took her own life. As soon as Alejandra heard this, she knew that they were wrong. There was no way that Ana would ever do this to herself or to her family. Ana's friends also came forward and said that yes, she was feeling down, but that she wouldn't do this. She actually had plans to go visit Long Beach, California on March 31st to be with her friends and family. She also told her friends that as soon as her contract ended in August with the military, she was not going to renew it and she was going to officially move to Long Beach, California. There, she was going to have a fresh start, and she was so excited about this. So because of this, the family feels like it's very odd that Ana would take her own life when she was so excited about the future. The family asked the military, is there any evidence to prove that Ana did this to herself? And they said no. There were no witnesses, no cameras, nothing to show that Ana did this. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on the case of 20-year-old Ana Fernanda Basaldua Ruiz and how she was found dead inside a base of Fort Hood, Texas. So the base says that there are no cameras, no witnesses, nothing to show that Ana did take her own life. Her father Baldo thought this was weird because so many people live at this base, so he doesn't understand how no one saw or heard what happened to Ana. Fort Hood did come out with a statement and they said that they are investigating Ana's death, but at this time they do not believe that foul play was involved. What happened to Ana reminds a lot of people of what happened to Vanessa Guillen. Vanessa was a 20-year-old soldier living at Fort Hood who was murdered in April of 2020. She had told her friends and family that she was being sexually harassed by someone at the base, and then she was murdered. Her killer, Aaron Robinson, actually unalived himself as police were zeroing in on him. So we have Vanessa Guillen, a 20-year-old Latina female soldier living at Fort Hood, complaining about sexual harassment. She told her family, friends, and superiors about this and then was murdered. Then we have 20-year-old Ana Fernanda Basaldua, who was also a young female Latina soldier living at Fort Hood, complaining about being sexually harassed. She tells her superiors about this and then she ends up dead. They're claiming that Ana took her own life, but her family and friends believe otherwise. Just too many similarities between what happened to Ana and what happened to Vanessa, and Ana's mother, Alejandra, honestly believes that her daughter's death is a cover-up. I feel like Fort Hood isn't telling the whole story, and they just want answers and justice. They want the truth. The family has created a GoFundMe, and a portion of the funds are going to be used to conduct a second autopsy on Ana's body. There hasn't been any public details about the autopsy or if it's been conducted yet or what's going on with that. The family did ask the coroner if they can conduct their own autopsy so they can get their own results, and he said yes, as long as you pay for it. So there is a GoFundMe open for that. Hopefully you guys can make a donation and, help the family out. At the end of the day, all the family wants is the truth. They want to know what happened to Ana and why no one was punished for sexually harassing her. They don't want this to be swept under the rug, so hopefully you guys can continue to help spread awareness and keep her case going. The family has been holding marches and vigils back in Mexico demanding for justice. As they're marching, they're shouting, "No estamos todas, nos falta Ana Fernanda. No estamos todas, nos falta Vanessa Guillen," which means we are not all here, we are missing Ana Fernanda. We are not all here, we are missing Vanessa Guillen. My thoughts and prayers go out to Ana's family. I am so sorry that this happened to her, and I truly hope that you all receive the answers that you're looking for. Let's talk about what happened to 22-year-old Leslie Palacio and how her killer is still on the run. Leslie was born on May 5th, 1998 in Las Vegas, and she was the second oldest of 5 sisters. They were all raised by their mother Araceli and their father, and they all described Leslie as a loving, kind, hardworking, and strong person. In 2020, she was studying phlebotomy, and she was also working as a lab assistant who would take people's blood. Leslie loved fitness, she loved health, and she loved spending time with her family. On August 28th, 2020, Leslie was at home trying to make plans to go out. She wanted to go out with her friends, so she texted a couple of people, but no one was able to go out. In that moment, Leslie received an Instagram message from a man named Eric Rangel. Now, Eric wasn't a stranger. He was actually the son of Leslie's godmother. He was a childhood friend, but they weren't really that close as adults because Eric actually had feelings for Leslie. He had asked her out on dates numerous times, but Leslie always said no because she just didn't feel that way about him. However, on this particular night, Leslie decided to say yes, and she agreed to go out with Eric, but just as friends. She told her sister Kareli that she was going to go out and that she would keep her posted throughout the night. She got ready, and at around 11 p.m., Eric pulled up in his white pickup truck and he picked up Leslie, and the two of them headed out for the night. Their first stop of the night was at the Longhorn Hotel and Casino, and the two of them headed over to the restaurant area. You can see the two of them on camera eating, hanging out, and it seems like everything is fine. They were there for a couple of hours and they left the bar at around 2 a.m. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Leslie was keeping her sister Kareli posted about what was going on. Around 4:40 in the morning, Leslie texted Kareli and said, "Dude, I gotta talk to you about some shit." Kareli immediately replied and she asked her sister, what's going on? She saw that Leslie was typing something, but then all of a sudden the typing bubble stopped. Kareli called and texted Leslie after this, but she never received a response. Later that morning, when Kareli woke up and got ready for the day, she realized that her sister was still not home. She called her once again, but received no response. Now she was starting to worry, so she went over to their mother Araceli and told her that she wasn't able to get in contact with Leslie. Called Eric to see if maybe he knew where Leslie was, but he also wasn't picking up the phone. So the family decided to go over to the Rangel house to see if maybe Leslie and Eric were there. However, when they pulled up to the house, they noticed that the Rangel family was acting very weird. Eric's sisters and his mother were in the driveway moving furniture. The Palacio family approached them and asked them, where's Leslie and Eric? Like, what's going on? And they just ignored the Palacio family, which again is so odd because these are literally family friends and Eric's mother is literally Leslie's godmother. They tried calling Eric again, but now his phone was disconnected. The family tried to file a missing persons report, but the police told them that they needed to wait 72 hours. So on August 30th, the family was finally able to file a report. What was odd is that the next day, Eric's family also filed a missing persons report for Eric and for his father, Jose. Okay, more in part. This is part 2 on what happened to 22-year-old Leslie Palacio and how her killer is still on the run. So the day after Leslie was reported missing, Eric's family also reported him missing along with his father, Jose. Which was odd because why is the dad also missing? You would think that the Rangel family would be joining the Palacio family to look for Eric, Leslie, and Jose, but no. They continue to be distant and cold toward the Palacio family. They also didn't want to talk to any reporters, and it seems like they didn't want to get the word out about Eric and Jose's disappearance. While the Palacio family was literally talking to the news, they were going on social media. They were doing whatever they could to bring awareness to Leslie's disappearance. After this, the Rangel family just kind of disappeared. Neighbors didn't see them go out anymore, so we're not sure if they moved or they just hid inside the house. Their behavior was just very odd, so police decided to ask the neighbors if they had any security footage that was pointing towards the Rangel house. And one of the neighbors did. The footage shows Eric and Leslie arriving to the Rangel home on August 29th at around 6:05 a.m. Eric takes Leslie out of the passenger seat and she just looks incapacitated. She could barely walk on her own. She literally had to lean on Eric in order to get inside the house. So they go inside the house at around 6:05 in the morning, and then an hour later at 7 a.m., Eric comes out of the house by himself. He tosses something small into his truck, gets inside, and then just drives away. He was alone at this moment, so where was Leslie? 15 minutes later, Eric goes back to the house, walks inside, and then walks out with his father, Jose. In this time, the two of them are carrying and kind of dragging a body wrapped in a blanket. Police assume that this was the body of 22-year-old Leslie Palacio. They put the body into the passenger seat of the truck. Eric gets inside and then drives away. Jose stays back and he starts hosing off the driveway. After looking at this footage, police get a search warrant and they go inside the Rangel home. Inside the house, they found cleaning supplies and they also found drops of blood. There was just cleaning supplies everywhere and it looked like someone had thoroughly cleaned the house. Even though there were drops of blood found in the house, to this day, police have not been able to confirm if that blood belonged to Leslie. At this point, police now know for sure that Eric and his father Jose are on the run. After further investigation, they discovered that one of their family members actually drove them across the San Isidro border in San Diego. So now the two of them were somewhere in Mexico. While police were on the hunt for Eric and Jose, they were also trying to find Leslie's body. And on September 9th, 2020, they finally found her. Her body was found not far from the road in the Valley of Fire. Since the desert was so hot, her body was heavily decomposed, so for this reason, they are not able to determine a cause of death. The hunt for Jose and Eric continued, and on January 19th, 2021, Jose was found. And he actually turned himself in at the San Isidro border in San Diego. Apparently, he turned himself in because he didn't want to be on the run anymore, but he says that he had no idea where Eric was. I don't have enough time, but go to part 3. This is part 3 on what happened to 22-year-old Leslie Palacio and how her killer is still on the run. So Jose turns himself in at the border, and when police ask him, "Where's your son Eric?" he says, "I have no idea." He said that as soon as I got into Mexico, they split up. That way it would be harder for them to be found. They take him to the interrogation room and they ask him, "What happened? Like, what did you do to Leslie?" He says that on August 29th, he was working in the garage when all of a sudden he saw Eric come running down the stairs shirtless. Eric was freaking out and he was dragging Leslie's body on a bedsheet. Jose decided to immediately jump in and help out his son by putting Leslie's body in the back of his truck. He says he did this because he didn't want any of the other family members to know what was happening. Eric told him that Leslie had died of an overdose and that he needed to get rid of her body. Jose says that he didn't see any visible injuries on Leslie and that she was partially clothed. Now, if Leslie really did die of an overdose, why wouldn't they call the police? If it was truly an accident, they should have called the police and notified Leslie's family. But what a lot of people think happened is that Leslie overdosed on something that Eric gave her without her consent. After getting rid of Leslie's body, the two of them decided to run and escape to Mexico. Now, Jose claims that none of the other family members know about what happened, but a lot of people find that hard to believe because the next day when the Palacio family went to go look for Leslie at the Rangel home, they were in the driveway moving furniture and acting very suspicious. So it's hard to believe that the family truly didn't know what had happened. Obviously, Jose was arrested and his hearing before a grand jury was in February of 2021. During this hearing, one of Eric's friends testified and said that on the morning of August 29th, he received a phone call from Eric. Eric called him from a burner phone and said that he was in Utah and asked his friend if he could go to the gas station to pick him up a can of gas. He told his friend that he didn't want to be seen on any surveillance footage, and when the friend asked him why, Eric told him, "I killed a bitch." He said this so calmly that the friend actually didn't believe him. He asked Eric again, why do you need the can of gas? And Eric repeated, "I killed a bitch. She's dead in the back seat of my truck right now." The way he's talking about Leslie just makes me so freaking mad. Like, you took her life and you're still calling her a bitch? The friend decided not to help Eric, so he hung up the phone, but he didn't call police immediately to let them know, "Hey, my friend just admitted to murdering someone." Going back to Jose, on June 18th, 2021, Jose actually pled guilty to all the charges. However, he was only sentenced to 2 years. 2 years for helping covering up a murder, hiding a body, escaping to Mexico. I mean, I don't understand how he only got 2 years. The Palacio family was so angry about this, and what's even worse is that Jose didn't even fully serve the 2 years. He was actually released early, and now he's just free and out and about. As of today, in 2023, Eric Rangel is still on the run. It's believed that he is somewhere in Mexico and the family just wants him to be found and be held accountable for what he did. Leslie was a beautiful young girl that had such a bright future ahead of her. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and I truly hope that Eric is found and that Leslie receives justice. This is what happened to 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen and how she was found murdered inside the military base of Fort Hood, Texas. Vanessa was born on September 30th, 1999 in Houston, Texas to her parents Rogelio and Gloria Guillen, who are originally from Mexico. Growing up, Vanessa told her mom that she either wanted to become an astronaut and go to the moon, or she wanted to enlist in the military. Gloria was not a fan of this. She actually told Vanessa that she would rather her go to the moon than to ever enroll in the military. However, when Vanessa turned 18 years old, she called her mom and said, "Do you remember what I was going to do when I turned 18? Well, I did it. I enrolled in the military." Of course, this was shocking news to the family, but they wanted to be supportive, and when they found out that Vanessa was going to be stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, which was about 3 hours away from Houston, they felt relieved knowing that she was only going to be 3 hours away. Now, while at Fort Hood, she was trained as a 91F small arms and artillery repairer, so kind of like a mechanic. And at first, things seemed to be going well. During this time, Vanessa was actually engaged to a man named Juan Cruz, and they had planned their wedding to be in December of that year. Vanessa was so excited about the wedding, she was so happy to be in the military, but over time, the family started to notice that Vanessa was acting different. She wasn't sleeping, she was losing weight, and something just seemed off. Vanessa told her family that the reason she was so stressed out was because she was being sexually harassed by a sergeant at the base. As soon as Gloria heard this, she told her daughter to immediately report this man, but Vanessa said no. That other girls had already reported him and nothing was done about it. So she figured if she reported him, no one would believe her. She was also scared that if she came forward, there would be some type of retaliation against her. Maybe she would get kicked off the base or something worse would happen. On April 22nd, 2020, Vanessa was actually supposed to have the day off, but that day she received a message from work asking her to come in. She only had a couple of things to do that day, so she thought she was just going to have like a half day, so she made plans with her friend Tay to go hiking later on. One of the tasks she had that day was to go to the arms room and get a serial number for one of the weapons. Vanessa made her way to the arms room and she texted the armor specialist, Aaron Robinson, letting him know that she was on her way. Around 10:23 in the morning, Vanessa sent a text message to one of her coworkers with the serial number of the weapon. And at around 11:13 a.m., Aaron Robinson closed the arms room. Now the morning continued and Vanessa was supposed to meet up with her friend Tay to go hiking, but she never showed up. Tay started calling Vanessa, sending her text messages, but she didn't answer. Meanwhile, Vanessa's family back in Houston was just as concerned. She hadn't responded to anybody. She hadn't responded to her fiance, to her sisters, to her mom, no one. Vanessa's sisters, Myra and Lupe, decided to call the base and ask for Vanessa. However, that's when the base told them that no one had seen or spoken to Vanessa since lunchtime. The family knew something was wrong, so that's when Myra, one of Vanessa's sisters, and her fiance Juan decided to get in the car and drive to Fort Hood. Meanwhile, back at the base, Vanessa's friend Tay is still looking for her. He went to Vanessa's apartment, but she wasn't there. However, her car was in the parking lot, so where was Vanessa? Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen and how she was found murdered inside the military base of Fort Hood, Texas. So Tay goes to Vanessa's apartment and sees that her car is still in the parking lot, but she's nowhere to be found. That's when Tay and another friend of Vanessa's named CJ start going around the entire base looking for Vanessa. They end up discovering that the last person known to have seen Vanessa was Aaron Robinson. So they somehow get his number, they call Aaron, and Aaron just seems annoyed at them. They asked Aaron, what happened earlier that day when he saw Vanessa, but he says that nothing, that he didn't even talk to Vanessa, and that after she was done in the arms room, she went to the motor pool, and that was it. That was the last time that he saw Vanessa. CJ and Tay are like, okay, well, did she say where else she was going throughout the day? And they said that Aaron just seemed so annoyed at the fact that they were asking these questions. He was mad at the fact that people were blowing up his phone asking him where Vanessa was, which is crazy because all CJ and Tay want to know is if their friend is okay, and this is literally the last person to have seen her. Going back to Vanessa's sister, Myra and Juan get to the base at around 3 o'clock in the morning. They pull up to the base and they ask to go inside to look for Vanessa, but the staff sergeant tells them that no, they can't come inside and that they need to come back in the morning. So instead, Myra and Juan get a hotel room and they just sit there and wait until morning comes so that they can look for Vanessa. So morning comes and Myra and Juan go back to the base to look for Vanessa, and at this point, it's been 24 hours since anyone has seen or spoken to Vanessa. One of the sergeants asked Myra if she wanted to go to her sister's room to see if anything was missing. Myra agreed, and when she got to Vanessa's room, she asked the sergeant, do you know where her phone is, her ID, her wallet, her personal items? And that's when the sergeant said, yeah, I know where they are. They're in my pocket. This sergeant literally had Vanessa's keys and her ID inside his pocket. Myra was so upset when she saw this because she thought that these items should be in evidence, not in some guy's pockets. Since Aaron was the last person known to have seen Vanessa, Myra and Juan went to go speak to him, but when they did, he literally laughed in their face. Yes, he laughed in their face and then just walked away. Myra just couldn't believe that this guy laughed in her face, and she honestly felt like the base wasn't doing enough to find her sister. sister. It wasn't until Vanessa's case started going viral on social media that the base finally took the investigation seriously. If the family wasn't getting help from the military, then maybe they could get help from the public. They came out and told the public about how Vanessa was being sexually harassed by a sergeant at the base, and a lot of people started to wonder if this had anything to do with Vanessa's disappearance. Now, of course, the military was suspicious of Aaron Robinson since he was the last person to have seen Vanessa. So they checked his phone records, and it showed that it pinged at a cell tower 30 miles away from Fort Hood the night that Vanessa disappeared. They started searching that area, and on June 30th at around 11:30 a.m., Vanessa's remains were found. Investigators concluded that Vanessa's body was burned and that she was murdered. Now, when police went to go confront Aaron, he pulled out a gun and took his own life. Now, even though Aaron was gone, police did charge his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, and charged her in connection to Vanessa's murder. Okay, more in part 3. This is part 3 on what happened to 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen and how she was found murdered inside the military base of Fort Hood, Texas. Police arrest Aaron's girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, and they charge her in connection to Vanessa's murder. She actually admitted to helping dispose the body of Vanessa. Now, her reason as to why Aaron murdered Vanessa is crazy. She says that when Vanessa was in the arms room the day she disappeared, she saw a photo of Cecily on Aaron's phone. And Aaron started to freak out because he thought that Vanessa was going to expose him and report him to her superiors. Now, the reason he was so freaked out is because Cecily was actually married to another soldier. Aaron was worried he was going to get in trouble, so in his mind, the only way to keep Vanessa quiet was by killing her. He bludgeoned Vanessa to death by hitting her in the back of the head multiple times. He then put her into a storage case and then went home. Later that night, he came back to the arms room and he dismembered Vanessa's body. Of course, with the help of Cecily, and the two of them went to the Leon River. They cut up Vanessa's body, set it on fire, and then they buried her in 3 different places. It's just absolutely crazy, and Cecily says the only reason she helped do this is because Aaron put a gun to her head. So she feared for her life and decided to comply. However, a lot of people don't believe that. On November 29th, 2022, Cecily pleaded guilty to 1 count of accessory after the fact and 3 counts of making a false statement. If she's found guilty, she could face up to 30 years in prison, so I will keep you guys posted on what happens. As for Vanessa, in May of 2021, a report came out confirming that Vanessa had verbally reported sexual harassment 2 times in 2019. So yeah, she did report this sexual harassment, but nothing was done about it. Now, she never reported Aaron Robinson for sexually harassing her, but that doesn't mean he wasn't doing it. Now, the Army maintains that Aaron never sexually harassed or assaulted Vanessa, but again, who knows? The I Am Vanessa Guillen Act was signed into law by President Biden, and this would change how they investigate and prosecute specifically sexual assaults in the military by bringing it to a prosecutor outside the chain of command. Now, the whole system needs to be fixed, but at least this is a step forward. It's just really heartbreaking that all Vanessa wanted to do was serve in the military and make her country proud, but instead, this horrible thing happened to her. If you guys want to hear more information, I go into more details on my podcast, What Happened with Jackie Flores. Episode 6 is out now on the Pastor Bedtime YouTube channel, and the audio is on all other podcast streaming platforms. My thoughts and prayers go out to Vanessa's family, and I truly hope she gets justice.